In the Twilight saga, every member of the Cullen family has a unique origin story that explains when, how, and why they were turned into vampires. The backstories of the Cullens are explored more fully in the books than in the movies, and they're a great way to understand each character and the motivations that drive them throughout the series. From Carlisle to Bella, the history of the Cullens extends across time periods and countries. Here's the Twilight vampires and their origins explained. In the world of Twilight, vampires are sworn to live in secrecy for the entirety of their eternal lives and must find ways to be part of society without drawing too much attention to themselves. A human is turned into a vampire when another vampire sucks their blood but doesn't kill them. Instead, the poison from the vampire's teeth takes over their body, stops their heart, and turns them into the beautiful, superfast, and strong creatures that Bella Swan encounters in the series. The Cullen family, aka the Olympic Coven, are reformed and vegetarian vampires who choose to only feed on animals rather than on humans. Carlisle Cullen, the patriarch of the family, uses his medical knowledge to save lives and only turns humans into vampires when they would die otherwise. This was the case with all four of the Twilight vampires he turned: Edward, Esme, Rosalie, and Emmett. The other two Cullens, Alice and Jasper, joined the family after they had already been turned into vampires. Additionally, Edward was the one to turn Bella. Here are all the Cullens' backstories in Twilight. Carlisle Cullen. Carlisle is the oldest of the Cullen family, born in 1640 in London, and his mother died giving birth to him. His father was an Anglican pastor who led a group that sought out and killed people they thought were witches, werewolves, and vampires to root out evil in their community. When his father was too old to continue these raids, Carlisle took over, though he never much agreed with them to begin with. Carlisle discovered a group of real vampires living in the sewers of London and led an attack against them, but he was bitten and left for dead. According to Carlisle's backstory, he hid for 3 days while his body was transformed into a vampire. Once he understood what he had become, he tried every way he could to kill himself, but his body was invincible. As a vampire, he resolved to only drink animal blood from the very start and traveled the world, spending some time with the Volturi in Italy, before settling in the United States and becoming a doctor. He then went on to form the Cullens, the main Twilight vampire family featured in the series. Edward Cullen. Edward was born in 1901 in Chicago as Edward Anthony Masson, the only child of an affluent lawyer and his wife Elizabeth, to whom Edward was very close. All three of the Massons caught the Spanish influenza in the pandemic of 1918, the father dying first. On her deathbed, Elizabeth begged Carlisle Cullen, who was the doctor treating them, to do everything he could to save her beloved son. As Edward himself was dying, Carlisle snuck him out of the hospital and back to his home, where he turned Edward into a vampire and became a father figure to him. Edward then became very rich after he inherited the Masson family fortune and accumulated wealth throughout his long life, as did the other Cullens. Esme Cullen. Esme was born in 1895 on a farm in Columbus, Ohio. When she was 16, she was treated for a broken leg by none other than Drive. Carlisle, with whom she bonded instantly. Years later, she was forced by her family to marry an abusive man, eventually running away from him when she discovered she was pregnant. In 1921, she gave birth to the child, but they died just 2 days later. Devastated, Esme attempted to kill herself by jumping off a cliff. The men who found her took her directly to the morgue, but Carlyle, who was working in a hospital nearby, noticed her heart was still beating. He recognized her as the girl he had met years before and decided to save her life by turning her into a vampire. Rosalie Hale. Rosalie has perhaps the darkest backstory of all the characters. She was born in 1915 in Rochester, New York to a wealthy family and was incredibly beautiful. At 18 years old, she became engaged to a bank owner's son who she didn't love. One night in 1933, shortly before their wedding, Rosalie came across her fiancé completely drunk with a group of friends who gang raped and beat her. Carlyle found her nearly dead and carried her away, where he turned her into a vampire and welcomed her into their family. According to Rosalie's backstory, the first thing she did was murder all her abusers, including her ex-fiancé, before settling down to become one of the Cullens. Emmett Cullen. Emmett was born in 1915 in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, to a large family, and he worked on the nearby railroad. He was a rambunctious teen who loved adventure and hunting. In 1935, he was in the mountains and ended up attacked by a black bear. Thankfully, Rosalie found him and carried him over 100 miles back to Carlisle to save his life via a vampiric transformation. She wanted to save him because she thought he looked innocent, young, and beautiful but didn't trust herself to change him without killing him. Alice Cullen. Alice Brandon's backstory saw her born as Mary Alice Brandon in 1901 in Biloxi, Mississippi. From an early age, she had premonitions that led many in town to believe she was a witch. After her mother was murdered and her father remarried, Alice escaped to a nearby town. There, her father had her committed to an asylum where she befriended an unnamed vampire doctor. Later, she had a vision that a tracker named James, the same one who later tried to kill Bella in Twilight, was looking for her, so her vampire friend turned her into a vampire to protect her and then sacrificed himself to James to give her time to escape. She went on to meet Jasper, and they joined the Cullens in 1950. Jasper Hale. Jasper was a young major in the Confederate Army in Texas who was turned into a vampire by Maria, another vampire, who wanted him to lead an army of young vampires she was creating to fight in the Southern Vampire Wars. Jasper worked with her until 1938 when he ran away to the north with another vampire friend of his named Peter. He met Alice in a diner in 1948 and joined the Cullen family along with her shortly after. Bella Swan. Bella starts out as a human at the beginning of the Twilight series. She was born in 1987 and moved to Forks to live with her dad when she was 17 years old, as shown in the first book and movie. In the fourth book of the series, Breaking Dawn, and the fourth movie, Breaking Dawn, Part 1, Bella is turned into a vampire after marrying Edward. Though Bella told Jacob that becoming a vampire wasn't originally the plan, it seems that Edward expected Bella to become a vampire from the very beginning. He transforms Bella by injecting her heart with his venom after it stops beating following the birth of their daughter, Renesmee. Once a vampire, Bella becomes the most recent addition to the Cullen clan and is the only one changed during the Twilight series. Renesmee. Renesmee is the only vampire-human hybrid featured in the Twilight series, and her backstory is told primarily through Breaking Dawn. Not only that, but her existence and Bella's life-threatening pregnancy are what caused Edward to change Bella into a vampire in the first place. Besides being depicted as a CGI monstrosity for the early stages of her life, she was brought into the world after nearly killing her mother in the womb. Renesmee has special powers, gifted to her by her vampire side, and is able to show people her thoughts by touching them. Jacob imprints on her, creating a special bond between the two. Renesmee is able to both eat human food and drink blood to sustain herself, though she prefers to drink blood. Once her existence is confirmed by the Volturi, she is hunted down by the Twilight vampires as they are convinced she is a turned vampire child, which is forbidden due to their dangerous nature. The Cullens are able to prove that Renesmee isn't a threat, and the Volturi leave the family alone once and for all. Where were the Cullens during New Moon? During the course of New Moon, Edward and the Cullen family were noticeably absent, so where did the Cullens go? During an incident at Bella's 18th birthday celebration, in which Jasper nearly attacks Bella, Edward decides that she is in too much danger by being involved with his family. He reacts to this by breaking up with her and then promptly falling off the face of the earth, which fuels Bella's descent into a deep depression, although she begins to heal after bonding with Jacob and the rest of the werewolf clan. Edward then reappears in Italy towards the end of New Moon with little explanation as to where he'd been this whole time. No concrete explanation is given, but there is a clue that's almost a blink and you'll miss it moment. When Edward calls and Jacob picks up, the statue of Christ the Redeemer can be seen in the background, meaning that Edward Cullen went to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It's unknown if the Cullens were there the entire time or if they jumped around a lot. Regardless, the question is never answered in Stephenie Meyer's Twilight book, so the scene was probably added into the movie to avoid a plot hole.